Hello and welcome back to the Stats File Preview Podcast. I'm Binman. Looking forward to reviewing the big win over Essendon, terrific 90-point turnaround from our horror show in Gather Round, and previewing our massive, huge game against the Crows at Adelaide Oval tomorrow. Really excited about that match. The Bombers game, terrific win, and I think a really significant and important win. So Andy noted on the podcast, for which he was howled down by George and I, that it was a forgettable match, and I actually think it was anything but in some respects. Certainly the second half was a bit forgettable, but or that third quarter in particular, I guess. But nonetheless, I think that it was a really significant win in the journey of our season this year. Critical to get those 4 points, and I was pretty wrong about the way that. Or perhaps it's old scar tissue about losing those sorts of games. When I think about what I was wrong about last week in my preview of that game, the thing I was most wrong about was doubting that Melbourne would be in the right headspace and position to run out this game. I think I was right about the fact that we clearly are fatigued, and I'll get into some of that in a second. But, you cannot question our focus, intensity, and mental preparation and physical preparation too for this game, for the Bombers game. So impressive on that front. But I guess in my defence, 50-odd years of following the Ds, there's been plenty of banana skin games where we've lost where we should have won. Before I go any further, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm recording this podcast, the Boonwurrung people. Pay respects to elders past and present and emerging listeners who might be listening to the Stats File Preview Podcast this week. So I'm going to jump straight into it. Hour of power here. My theory of the case for the Bombers game, I think, informs the analysis and looking at the data. And my theory of the case, there's a connection between my understanding and analysis of the game against the Bombers and our approach to the game against the Crows. So bear with me with that. So just a quote from the review of the upcoming Crows game by the Oracle on Demonland. If you're not a Demonland reader, there's every week there's a preview, excellent preview by different authors, different Demonland posters about the upcoming game. And this one's the Oracle previews the Crows game coming up, but I'm going to quote from that and relate it to this game, and it sort of connects to my theories of the case in my thinking about the game coming up against the Crows as well. So what explains our rise was the pretext, the context for this quote. So what explains the Demons' rise this season? Quoting the Oracle, the reason is King and his coaching group. They've backed an innovative approach, a transformed game style, elite fitness, relentless energy, and a willingness to challenge convention. What has emerged feels like evolution, something new at Melbourne and perhaps within the game itself. The evolution of the game is not a phenomenon confined to Melbourne alone. The style that delivered premierships only a few years ago is steadily being overtaken by one that places an even greater emphasis on fitness, endurance, and running capacity. These demands test every side and have made week-to-week consistency increasingly difficult to achieve. At present, Fremantle stands out as the competition's dominant force, with Sydney showing a degree of reliability but a few steps behind. Beyond them, however, most teams remain vulnerable to significant fluctuations in form. Consider the GWS Giants, who emerged from a trough just a month ago to demolish Brisbane and Melbourne by 78 and 49 points respectively, only to fall to Saints, to St Kilda last Sunday, and in doing so, so that's the quote, but in doing so, they looked pretty lethargic and poor, I have to say. They looked really average in that game. And I wanted to highlight that because Oracle's spot on, and I made this comment earlier in the season and a number of times on the Demonland podcast. I totally agree that the game is, as I've noted many times, the game is really becoming all about endurance, running capacity. As I noted on the Demonland podcast on Monday, I must have heard without exaggeration, King say the phrase athletic profile. Geez, it'd be dozens of times this year. So, you need a good athletic profile to be playing the game the way it's being played, that with the amount of running involved. And I think that King has obviously gone out to look to build that athletic profile. It's a critical dimension of the game, but that the fluctuation in forms, explains why you get such anomalous results, like the Crows smashing the Dogs last week, who have been impressive in the weeks before, but look miles off it against the Crows, absolutely miles off it. And I think that's the intersection of the running power of lists, the way the game's been played, and the high performance management of teams. Is increasingly the media can't ignore it, and it's starting to sort of force its way through in the analysis, thankfully, because if you take that out of the picture, it's just impossible to get a full sort of, a holistic analysis of any individual game or performance if you ignore the impact of that high performance stuff. So why I'm prefacing my review of the Essendon game with that is because I think one of the really clever things King has done this season is in terms of managing the fatigue, the mid-season fatigue that all teams feel and always have done, particularly a team like the D's, who have yet to have a bye. They've been really clever, and obviously in concert with the high-performance team, and a huge shout-out to Selwyn Griffith for the work he's done since he's been at the D's, but particularly this year in this context. Obviously the footy department, the coaching, the head coach and the high-performance team work really closely together, but it feels like that they're using things like time on ground, and in particular game style, as a way to mitigate the impact of the mid-season, this phase, rounds 8, 9, 10 rounds 8 through to about 13, 14, 15. That fatigue needs to be managed somehow, and the mid-season bye is obviously critical as part of the loading and planning for the next stage of the season. But it feels like King has used quite an innovative approach, taking a lead, I think, from the way of Cats have done it. It's not just sort of the high-performance team, but as I say, they're using the time on ground, which, of course, is a high-performance program thing, but in concert with the coach. But I think what's really unique and different about King this year is he's using game style, the way we play, to help mitigate the fatigue and the impact of a long season and being in the middle of that season without having had a bye. And I think that's most notable in what I've been banging on about us kicking along to a contest, which is way we play anyway, even when we're up and about and running over the ground, we kick along to the contest. But what I'm really meaning is those long kicks to the top of the goal square, which cause people frustration. But I think that it's a big part of that is to make it a low possession, not such a ballistic sort of back and forth running game. Trap it inside 50 if you can, trap it deep and set up your defence behind it. So I'll touch on that in a little bit more detail. But, I think King's been really clever. Each game has got, as I've talked about, each game looks slightly different from a tactical point of view, slightly different from a game plan point of view, slightly different from strategy and certainly system point of view, and much different, of course, to Goody's sort of process of this mid-season bye. We often, until the last year, that changed in the last year, but say 20 to 23, we would play the same way the whole season, pretty much, with some tweaks, obviously. And I think that was a big factor, to be honest, in why we perennially under Goody struggled in that mid-season period, because that high contest mega defense style that Goody loves so much is obviously super taxing, but so's our method, because we're still high contest, high defense, but our best footy, the footy that people have been most excited about us playing, is very taxing from a running perspective in terms of the amount of ground covering. I mean, the game is, even if you're not having a high sort of transition game. There's a lot of running involved in any case. So he's been very clever, and that's been supported by really, good sort of, I think, flexibility with selection. So I talked about this on the Binman podcast, but it's a remarkable how well we're travelling given our injury list this season. And that makes things like rotating players, managing players even more challenging. So King's done a great job. So's the high performance program in bringing players in to manage that. So this week Fitzgerald came in last week and he's in this week again, as an example. Hats off, kudos to the high performance program, so on Griffith and of course King for that approach. I think that comments from Oracle that I just read, it's a really interesting feature of footy, and it rubs against the grain a bit for the way the media like to see every game as equal importance as the next game. And, it's even less now that each game is a litmus test on a team's chances of winning a flags, at least up until I think that dynamic changes, to be honest, pretty much from round 16 on, because then you really want to start winning games. I think that it becomes more of a litmus test the deeper we get into the season, and of course the closer we get to finals. But there's just so many variables, and so many times you can just see it. Like, you can watch it. You don't need to be a sports scientist. Not that I'm a sports scientist, but you can just see sometimes when a team isn't come to play, isn't wound up. I heard Kane Corns last night talk about how wound up the Freo talk were after halftime, and that's exactly right. And that's shorthand for they are running hard over the ground. They're looking fit, and geez, they looked super impressive in that second half. I thought Freo, as Oracle notes, they're the competition's dominant force at the moment. So, leading to this game, that's a long introduction and caveat for this game, but it's, as I say, the theory of the case for this game. I think we clearly came into this game with a focus on smashing Essendon early, getting control of the game, and as much as possible going into conservation mode in the second half. And I think that's exactly what happened. I was really surprised that Heath didn't come in. My take was that we decided to go Maxi one out to fully leverage our advantage from a clearance and stoppage perspective, fully leverage the advantage Maxi had over Brian. The plan, get a lead at halftime, go into control mode with Maxi being the sort of key driver of that. And it worked a treat. That's exactly what happened. Maxi smashed Brian. We had a big enough buffer at halftime to go in control. Into control mode, and that's exactly what we did. I won't go into some of the detail, but just other than, I mentioned this on the Demon Land podcast on Monday about Gorn's game in this, but it was incredible. He took all but one centre bounce, which is nuts, and it sort of speaks to, I think that's evidence of that strategy to dominate in that area. And Cos took all but three. Again, get your best players around the ball, win the contest, win scores from stoppages, get a lead and control the game. My feeling is in that third quarter, and it felt really like that watching live, is that that's what was happening when you saw it. And it felt like we lost our rhythm a bit, and they scored those early goals. There's three, I think they scored from memory the first three goals of that third quarter. And for me, it felt that sort of was a manifestation of us dropping down a gear and going into control mode, and they took a bit of an advantage of that. But what was really impressive is that there was a period where we dominated, we got that control back, we controlled possession, and we didn't put the score on the scoreboard for a little while, but it looked like they definitely weren't going to come at us. They got within 18 points, but it really felt like that was as close as they were going to get. And when we did get that next goal, I think that was the end of the game when we got it back out to 4 goals. Again, I noted this on the podcast on Monday night, but Maxi was the highest rated player on the ground, 25-point rating, 0.7, crazy good game. But the point really I wanted to make is that 20.2 of those were in the first half. Amazing half of footy. Similar for Cos, he had an even bigger first half of footy, 20.4 player rating points he had in the first half. He ended up with 24.7. So 80% of his points more were he accrued in that first half. So we went out hard, and then we went into control mode once we got that lead. And I think the numbers evidence that as well. So, for example, we were in that third quarter, we were plus 23 for uncontested possessions. That speaks to that plan of conserving energy. We're plus 31 for disposals. And the context for that is we're a super, super low possession side. We hardly ever have more disposals than the opposition, let alone 31 more disposals in a quarter of footy. So clearly a strategy to maintain that lead and to conserve energy. That's reflected in the team pressure ratings as well. In that third quarter, we had a season low pressure rating of 140. They had 159, so minus 19. So that, we were just playing keeping off footy. It was a very low pressure quarter. But we did run through the line pretty well in that game, both from a number of metrics. But player pressure is a good indicator. 184 in that last quarter. They were 167 plus 17 for the match. 167 to 168. So unsurprisingly, for the total match, it was a low pressure game. So it worked a real treat in terms of that approach, I think. And where that theories of the case comes in is that, and I'll tie this together in a sec, is that part of that was the thinking about this next game. And so I really like the way King has been talking about the preparation for the Crows game, even before the Bombers game, and connecting this game, sort of seeing the Pies game, the Bombers game and this Crows game as a sequence of games. So, the Dogs game before that as well, all looking ahead with the bye rather than, just going the week-to-week thing, is looking at it in totality. And so, it speaks to me that their planning, is very much focused on being, in at best position physically and condition-wise to beat the Crows, of course, with the limitations, just the reality of where we are in the year with not having had a bye. I'll go through the sort of at the high level. I'll race through all of the key stats as I do. I just wanted to touch on the player ratings. I talked about this on the Demonland podcast, as I always do, so I tend not to do so much of that on the Stats File preview pod, not wanting to double up, but just run through them because I wanted to highlight this was one of those games where senior players are really important mid-season, doing it tough. We've got a young side, 10 players in this game under 50. That's under 50 games. 10 players under 50 games. That's a inexperienced side. So our top 7 players were Maxi Gawn, Cozzy Pickett, Trent Rivers, Ed Langdon, Jake Lever, Jack Steele were our top 6. Jack's were our top 6. And so they're all senior players, obviously. So all 100 games plus, and it just shows the importance of those senior players. So really interestingly, though, I wanted to highlight number 7 was Colt. Terrific, 12.4, including 5.1 player ratings in that last quarter. Really, really impressive. For ball winning, of his 12.4, 7.3 of them he accrued of those points in how he won the footy. I'm being increasingly impressed with Colt this season. He's become a really reliable best 23 player and one of our best defenders. Jake's Lever had another cracking game, and he's looking in cracking nick, and he's been really important for our improvement in our defensive profile, which I'll touch on in a few minutes. Another great game from Eddie Langdon, who's been awesome this season. And as I said, Trent Rivers third. I mentioned this on the Demonland podcast. Terrific game, 9.1 for how we used the footy. Cozzy was 12 of his rating points were how we used the footy. But Trent Rivers really, since he's come back into the side, despite the sort of feeling from many Demonland posters that they were worried or that he hadn't been playing well, he's he's been in our top 5 players since he's come back in, maybe with the exception of one game. But impressive game from him again. Just at the bottom of that table for player ratings was Bailey Laurie, 0.5 player rating points. So no surprise that he was dropped this week. And interestingly, he's an excellent kick as a rule. Bailey Laurie, it was really what was his number one sort of, I guess one would, for want of a better phrase, as a junior when he was drafted. But in this game, he was minus 3.6 for rating points. So he obviously turned it over in some poor areas and missed some opportunities, including a pretty easy set goal that he tried a banana, I think, from memory. Before I do jump into just some numbers around the defensive stuff. I might hold that off actually just before I jump into the. I'll speak to them just before I preview the Crows game. So racing through the key numbers, the key team stats from this game. Our kicking efficiency was okay. I've talked about this before. I probably will stop talking about it full stop. I don't think it's that great a measure, but it was better than theirs. Theirs was pretty poor. But it was above AFL average, our kicking efficiency. We had 46 clangers. The AFL average is 57.1 per game. So we were well under that. They only had 49 or only, so that's under AFL average. But it was a pretty low pressure game, so perhaps that was a factor. Massive sort of kick meters gained. Speaking to what I said before about us kicking deep, we're a territory team anyway, but over the last 5-6 weeks, as part of that pattern of mitigating the fatigue, we're really we're further. So AFL average for meters gained from kicking is 5,714 this season. Our season average is 5,802. In this game, meters gained by kicks was 6,189, almost a kilometre, 905 more than Essendon. So it just speaks to that method, really long, kicking direct towards the goal. Handball meters gained was the interesting one. In this game, 226 we had in this game. They had 52, so we were plus 174. We're averaging 388 this season, meters gained by hand. 320 meters gained is the AFL average. I noted last week I made a definitional thing, used the scar beaters to try and explain the meters gained, but I'll try another analogy. I do love my analogies, or perhaps it's a metaphor. I can always confuse those two things. It's important to note with meters gained, I made this comment before, so sorry for repeating myself on this one, but I think it's important because meters gained, they talk about it they're talking about it on every bloody show now, and as if it's some sort of magic new stat. It's important because it describes the way the best teams are playing at the moment. In particular, Sydney, everyone's enamoured with the way that they're playing the footy, but it includes any running with the ball. So, as I said last week, your handball on the Binman podcast, you get a handball receive, your handball or from a stoppage, for instance, you handball to a teammate. The handball goes 15 metres. That teammate runs 15 metres and then handballs 15 metres. That's 45 metres gained. So the metaphor that I'm going to use is music. Is they often say it's not the note that's important; it's the space between the notes. And I think the space between the notes in handball meters gained is the running carry that happens between the handballs. And for me, why that's important is because it describes the method better, why it's important, and you can really get a sense of why handball meters gained is so relevant and such a good number to get a sense of how well teams move the ball from the back half and transition, how effectively and quickly they can, their ball movement is from from the defensive half to the ground to the forward half of the ground. So yeah, I think that's well worth noting. In this game, it was crazy. So in the Pies game, as I talked about, that game was very much a high handball meters gained transition between the arc, lots of back and forward running. From memory, I can't quite remember. I didn't write this one down, but it was I think we were 628 metres gained. They were 950 something or other. So 900, maybe say 1,528 metres gained from memory last week in total in that Pies game. Sorry, not last week, the week before the Pies game. In this game, it was, what did I just say in this game? It was, the total was 276. So we're talking like 1,300 less metres gained from handball. So, why that's helpful, I think, even just to think about the game. So it was anything but a high transition game from that sense. And, again, goes back to my point that I'm making about the way King is slightly different, or not slightly, quite a significantly different strategy every week. And I think that part of that is making sure that we can get through this period of time and win the games like the one against Essendon, and maximise our chances of doing so. Time in forward half, 52-47. That's pretty good for us in terms of, we're 50 bang on. What is our average? 51.4, so tick above that. 63-41 inside 50s, smashing there, plus 22. That really, really fleshes out that sort of idea of us being territory and getting inside 50. We had 14 more shots at goal, ditto for in terms of our method in this game. We were... people complain and often feel like that kicking to the top of the goal square is ineffective, and maybe it's sort of that scar tissue that I have about MFCSS is the scar tissue of kicking long to a contest under Goody and us not being able to turn that into a score. Well, in this game, as evidence of that actually being quite effective, that method is kicking scores for inside 50. 47.6 was ours. That was slightly better, actually, 48.8, but AFL average is 46.2. So our scores for inside 50 was better than AFL average and better than our season average, which is 44.9. So just on that metric, it's not as fun to watch as kicking long to a goal square, goes to the front, you win the clearance and score a goal, hopefully, as the end-to-end transition goal. With that method, you get less marks inside 50. So we only had 8 marks inside 50 in this game as opposed to 13 in the high transition game against the Pies, for instance. But nonetheless, it's effective. So 47.6% of the time we went inside 50, we scored. Our season average is 44.9. So goals for inside 50 were slightly less than our season average, 20.6% of the time we went inside 50, we scored a goal. Our season average is 24.9. So that speaks to our inaccuracy as much as anything. Change of score percentage, smashed them there. Defensive 24% of the time to 17%. All the numbers we gave them a pretty good bath in. So I won't belabor the point. Defensive 50 to score percentage, again, speaking to not being a good transition game. Only 5.6% of the time from our D50 did we score. The season AFL average is 10.4. They were even more. They were woeful, 4.2% of the time, well under half of AFL average from moving the ball from the back half. This is one of the big ones we smashed them in terms of transition stats. Defensive half to forward 50%. So getting it from the defensive half to the forward 50, we did that 43% of the time, 43.7% of the time when we chained it up from our defensive half, well and truly above AFL average 32 and well and truly above our season average of 34.5% of the time. So we moved the ball from the back half really effectively, and we got it in deep, obviously, as I was saying before. Defensive half to score, again, that was above our AFL average and above our season average. Defensive half to score percentage, 16.9 to their 9.7. AFL average is 13.8% of the time. And our season average for scoring from defensive half is 15.7, so above that as well. Absolutely smashed them for contested possessions, plus 32, 140 to 108. Season AFL average is 129.1 contested possessions per game for each team, and we absolutely blitz that. The ground ball gets plus 21, awesome, good numbers for this week because the Crows are a big ground ball gets, as I will unpack in a little bit. We were plus 17 for post-clearance contested possessions. We were plus 21 for post-clearance ground ball gets. That is a smashing, total smashing in the contest. Curiously, contested marks, which has been a real strength of ours, as I've noted on the last couple of preview pods, were we only took 4. They took 7. AFL average only 8.9 contested marks are taken per game. Clearances, we had 9 more clearances, 5 more in total, 5 more centre clearances, 4 more stoppage clearances. We got the first possession 16 more times than them. Defensively, we were strong. I'll talk about that. That's the bit that I wanted to touch on before I go into the Crows. +7 for intercepts, +3 for intercept marks. Bang on the same number of tackles. We had 8 more tackles inside 50. And we didn't lose a single defensive one-on-one contest. They lost 42.9% of their defensive one-on-one contests. That's really terrible. Season AFL average is 25.3. Our season average is 25. We didn't lose one. That's awesome. Super impressive. Our defensive effort really in this game really speaks to what I said before. We came into this game with exactly the right mental approach. I was really impressed, really impressed with how we played in this game and the I guess as the intensity that we brought to this game and the planning and the strategy to maximise the likelihood we would win this game. Really impressed. All while, as I said, with an eye to next week in terms of being as fresh as possible to take on the Crows. Hitouts, +5 for hitouts. We had 8 more hitouts to advantage. Absolutely smashed them for equity points for post clearance. We were +41, so 149.4 of our total equity points when you aggregate up all the player ratings for the game. 149.4 to 107 +41. That is really crazy town stuff. So AFL average for equity points for post clearance is 126.4. Smashed them for how equity points for ball winning. And also look at this one. This is, God, this hurts if you're an Essendon fan, I tell you. AFL average for equity points per game for a team per game is 51 equity points per game. We had 63 in this game. They had a woeful 25.9 equity points from how they use the footy. Really, that is terrible. Our season average is 61.9, so slightly better than our season average. I talked already about the quarter-by-quarter differentials, so I won't go into them other than to say that first quarter we were +11 inside 50s in that first quarter, really stamped our authority on the game early, and we had 4 more shots at them in the first quarter at goal and 10 more shots at goal in the second quarter. Super impressive. Looking down to flip through the expected score. Interestingly, this is the 3rd week in a row that, maybe even the 4th, certainly the 3rd week in a row that our actual score is lower than our expected score, but not dramatically. So our expected score was 96.9. Our actual score was 95. Essendon's expected score was 53. So they weren't, and their actual score was 50. So it's not as if they were sort of woefully inaccurate, and we weren't actually that woefully inaccurate. But the interesting thing about expected score is each goal or each shot at goal is, the way they do it is essentially what's the average from that spot given, all of the different variables in terms of score and what the score is compared to that. Is we missed some easy ones, it felt like, but geez, we kicked some blinders. So I think that's the same deal actually with the Pies game as well, whereas we missed some easy ones, but the goal like Langford kicked against the Pies, that's a big expected score one. So that's really impressive in terms of some of our kicking for goal this year. Let's have a look. Territory I talked about, but yeah, it was 60-40 in that first quarter. We really jumped out of the blocks and looked to dominate that game from the get-go, and we dominated territory. It ended up being 52-48 for the match, which is bang on our season average, 52-48, 52% in our forward half, 48% in our opponent's forward half. So that last quarter, it was 56-44 when we were sort of, I think, looking to the line and looking to conserve energy. Score sources, kick-ins, Dragons, we scored a point. We're averaging 4.9. They scored a point. We scored 7 points from centre bounce. Again, really low. We're averaging 13.1. It's been 7, 7, and 4, I think, and 2 the last 3-4 games. Centre bounce scores. That's. I wonder whether that's a function of fatigue as well, but certainly we're dropped off from scoring from centre bounces, even though our clearance rate is approximately the same. So, we're still winning the clearances at approximately the same rate from the centre bounces, but we're not turning them into scores. Maybe teams are defending better against us, or they're putting more pressure on us. Certainly teams going to work when they don't have a dominant ruckman. They're putting time into whoever Maxi taps it to and looking to sharp them. Maybe that's a factor as well. They only got 2 points, though, from centre bounce. Only 9 points scored from centre bounce in this game, which is really, really low. Season average against us is 11.7. Stoppages around the ground, 24. We're averaging 26.5, so a little bit under our season average. They only scored 12. So all up, what's that? That's 12. We're only scored 17 more points from stoppages in total from them. So given the, I suspect they would have liked to have had more than that, but nonetheless, that's we won the total clearances and the scores from stoppages, which is what they aim to do. A huge one. This is probably the sort of biggest number in terms of the difference between the two sides, and it goes to my point probably before about the number of the ball use equity points, that how woeful they were in this space. We scored 63 points from turnover. Our season average is 53.3. They scored 35 points from turnover. So what's that? 28 points plus 28 for turnover. That was a big factor in the final score for sure. We're really, in the way we're playing at the moment, with forward half, get it in, deep kicks to the top of the square. Huge percentage of our score in the last 4 or 5 weeks have come from the defensive midfield. That is, again, that trend happened in this match. We had 30 of our points were scored in the defensive midfield. Season average against a season average of 23.5. Only 10 of their points were scored from the midfield, so plus 20 from the midfield. Just sort of to give that some context, our opponents are averaging 19.4 points a game from the defensive midfield, so the Bombers only half that. Attacking midfield, 32 of our points were from the attacking midfield, so it's really a critical. So what's that? 62 of our points. So a big percentage of our points scored from the defensive and attacking midfield, really showing the way we like to be a territory team and win the contest, win defence. Points from defensive half, we're averaging 38.8 from our defensive half this season, 37 in this game. Our opponents are also, interestingly, averaging 38.8 against us, which is interesting, or it's curious. The Bombers can only manage 17 from their back half. They're a mile off it in terms of implementing that sort of 2026 game plan, turnover and transition game plan. But, as I mentioned in the preview last week, you've got 15 players on an injury list, 10 of which are best 23, 5 of which are arguably best 10, and makes implementing any game plan difficult. So I think that really is a huge caveat on all of these numbers. As I mentioned before, remarkably, Maxi went to all but 1 centre bounce attendances, Cozzy all but 3, Jake Steele all but 4, and Tommy Sparrow all but 7. So outside of Maxi, it was our centre bounce attendees were Cozzy, Jack Steele, Tom Sparrow, Joel Fitzgerald, another a great performance by him, great debut. So again, we're only using 4 players in the centre bounce rotation this now, and that seems to, that's been the case since that Freo game when we used 11 from memory way back. So that, that's clearly says to me that that's where they've landed. Maybe once we move to a more dynamic sort of high transition style again, which I think we will as we approach the finals, maybe that will change a bit, and perhaps that's also a sort of feature of the way we've been playing in the last 5-6 games in terms of being more meat and potatoes, more territory, more contest, get it deep, trap it in. Dare I say it, more Goodwin-like, more Hardwick-like. We hit-outs, Maxi had 29 hit-outs to advantage, almost 50% of them, 15 went to touch over, went to advantage. Fantastic. So he gave Brian an absolute bath. That strategy worked a treat. His season average for hit out to advantage 32.7, so tick above 50% in this game. That's impressive. Luca Kenfield had 10 ruck contests, 5 of which he got 5 hit outs, only 1 to advantage though. Petts took 1 and Van Ruin had 3. The opposition, Nick Bryan, had 63, 24 hit-outs, and the other one was Lachlan Blackiston. He had 10. All right, so that's last week's review. Just before, as I said, just to wrap that up, fantastic win, I think. Super important we got those 4 points. A lot to like about the way we went about it from a preparation and psychological perspective. Huge game from our leaders, as I mentioned before. Massive game from Maxi, massive game from Cos, and I think a really excellent coaching performance from Stephen King. So before I jump into the preview of the Crows game, I just wanted to make a comment about our improved defence. I've been talking about it the last 2-3 weeks. We're clearly improved in that space. We're on an uptick. It's something that we, to be a contender, we need to be in that top 6, ideally top 4 for defensive sides. They talk about that premiership window that gets a lot of traction every year, or a lot of talk, at least on Fox Footy. So that quadrant is defence and attack, and where you're rated, and I think it's top 6 or maybe it's top 4 to be in that quadrant, a premiership window as they call it. So we've definitely got to sort out defence. I've always been confident that Goody. What am I talking about? There you go. There's a Freudian slip. That King would have a focus on that, and that's certainly been the case. I've been talking about it a little while over the last few weeks, and there's been some chat about it. So some of these numbers are from Montagna, who talked about it on the First Crack preview Wednesday night about our improved defence. So over the last 6 weeks, we've gone from a bottom 6 defence in the first sort of third of the season to top 4. Defence in the last 6 weeks. So in the last 6 weeks, rounds 0 to 6, we were 15th for points against. The last rounds 7 to 14th, we're 7th. Rounds 0 to 6, we were 16th for scores inside 50 against. In the last around 7 to 14, we're now number 5. We're number 5 in those rounds. Rounds 0 to 6, we were number 15 for chain to score against. That's 7 to 14, we're 5th. Round 16, rounds 0 to 6, number 16 in the AFL D50 to inside 50 against. In the last 6 games, we've got that up to number 9 in the AFL. That first third of the season, we were 14th for handball. Handball, not inside 50 against. The round 0 to 6, we were 15th for defending post clearance ground ball, which is really, really relevant for this game against the Crows coming up. However, from round 17, 14th, we improved that ranking to 5th. In the last 5 weeks, we're conceding mid-80s. The last 6 weeks, after having averaging 100 points plus, I think it was 100.5 or something on average for the first third of the season. So really good numbers in terms of improvement. I've been really impressed with the defensive unit, our defensive system. I think Lever's been a big factor in that. A huge factor has been, no doubt about it, absolutely no doubt about it, is Bowie. And I think Rivers too needs kudos, because apart from the one game when he came in and took, when Windsor went out against the Dogs, he took his midfield minutes, but outside of that, he's been back at halfback flank and been a really big factor in our improved defence, I think. A bit of caveat on those numbers, though, and I think that this is something that sort of frustrates me to a degree, as I've noted. If you don't factor in fatigue, high performance, and the what I talked about at the top around the notion of the changing nature of footy to becoming a athletic running game, and what that means for week to week preparation, is that you have to factor in that we're in a period, the last 6 weeks coincides with a period where scoring is down across the AFL, where teams are defaulting more to a contest in defence, where it's harder to move the ball at speed from the back half for us and our opponents because of fatigue. That's just a given. And I heard, why I think it's important to factor that in. I heard David King maybe a week ago talk about the significant drop-off in the Swans scoring power in the last 6 weeks compared to the first 8 weeks of the season or the first 7 weeks of the season. He argued that teams, citing the Saints as an example, had worked them out to an extent, particularly in terms of stopping their high-octane transition game, which is fueled by those handball metre gains and moving it forward at pace, and I think that's true to an extent. No doubt about that. You put pressure on the receiver. All of those things I've talked about in for instance, the preview of the Swans game. So I think that's right. But he didn't factor in at all the high performance considerations at all. All teams are fatigued in this phase of the season. They're just not playing at the same sort of high octane level that they do for the first 4, 5, 6 games of the season. So for me, that explains the Swans scoring drop off as much as tactically other clubs going to work from a tactical perspective. And so the same is true for us as well. So, there's been a big improvement, but the caveat is that, all teams have probably improved in that space. So, I think that's an important caveat. But nonetheless, impressive defensively, and we're definitely on the upswing for that. Alrighty, we're going to now jump into the preview of the Crows game. Being as objective as possible, you can mount a case that the only teams below us that are a realistic chance of taking our top 4 spot. I've been joking that the ladder I've been saying that the ladder doesn't lie, but I joked on Monday night on the pod, or Tuesday night on the pod, that the ladder can tell fibs though, because of course we've yet to have our bye, so we're top 4 with an asterisk. But leaving that asterisk aside, the only teams below us, I think, that are a realistic chance of taking our top 4 spot are the Hawks, Crows and Lions. Personally, I'm discounting the Dogs because even though they're on equal points with the Crows and Lions, their percentage is just woeful, mid-90s or something, but it's almost a game down in of itself with that. And I think that despite winning 8 games, 90% percentage or whatever it is, speaks to some real problems with their defensive system. I think the realistic chances of teams below us taking our top 4 spots are the Hawks, Crows and Lions. So the Crows have a great run home. They're a massive threat of taking our spot. So I think that makes this game absolutely massive, a hugely important game for our season and our chances of finishing top 4. I really like the way that King's talked about the focus of this, and that, we can go in and really throw everything at it with the safe and the knowledge we've got the bye this week. So massive game. So let's have a look at some of the things I look at each week in the preview. Injuries, Crows best 23 out at the moment. I think it's always important to look at the sort of injuries for strength. Out of their best 23 at the moment, Pedlar, Hinge, Cummings, Archie and Butts. I don't think any of them are top 10 players really, maybe Pedlar, possible exception of Pedlar perhaps. But really that's a pretty healthy injury list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So only 5 of their best 23, and maybe Butts and Archie, probably. Well, Archie maybe, but he hasn't got it going this season as he's had hamstring injuries and barely played a game. So, that's a pretty healthy injury list. Against that, we've been smashed for injury. We've got 11 players on the injury list, 7 of which are best 23, I think. Salem, Windsor, Viney, Mycheck, Cully, Petty and Lindsay. So a third of your best 23 out, as opposed to maybe two of their best 23, or 3 or 4 maybe. They're definitely better in that space terms of, in terms of their injury and where they're at injury-wise. In terms of selection, so let's have a look at that. I'll go through that in a sec. So their outs, Pedlar out, hurts for sure, but it's offset by their big ins in Isaac Rankin, back from his calf injury, Taylor Walker, returning from a well-deserved suspension. And the other player is a huge in. Their other player in is Keane. massive, I think, because he strengthens an already strong defense, and he was super important to their surge last season. He was number 3 in 25 in the AFL for intercepts. He was number 6 for 1%ers and number 16 for rebounds, and on the back of those numbers made the All-Australian squad for the first time, so huge in for them. For us, Pets out is huge. So Pets comes out. He's huge. I think that's a big out. I suspect he might have gone back and perhaps taken Taylor. Either way, going backstage forward, he robs us of a senior player, strong player, and also robs us of flexibility, being able to move him forward and back as required. Cook was unlucky, obviously, with his injury. I was impressed with his performance. As I noted, unsurprising really, that Laurie was dropped, given he was our lowest rated player last week and butchered the ball a little bit. I'm surprised, I have to say, Melks held his spot. So yeah, that I thought that was an interesting call. I was pretty confident he'd come out, and a little surprised as well, I have to say, that Latrell was not brought back in. I love the fact, though, that means I can see him play tomorrow, Casey versus Williamstown, and that he'll get a good rest before, with a bye after this game, before I think almost certainly coming straight back in after the bye. I'll be really surprised if he doesn't come in after the bye. He's really, really important to our game, and particularly our ability to do the sorts of running that our game, offensive and defensive running that our game demands. Our ins, I think Jeffo gets another shot at cementing his spot after his first half goals last week at Casey. I really hope he cements it and steps up and goes to, let's hope he has his breakout game. This would be a great one to do it in. The ever-reliable T-Mac comes in to stiffen our tall defensive options. Be interesting to see whether he goes to Walker. Philthorpe will be, critical to... It's going to be tricky, actually. I think Disco will go to Philthorpe, and I think that even though T-Mac's probably, he's not awesome one-on-one against those big key forwards, but certainly I don't think Taylor Walker's going to exploit his probably T-Mac's sort of weakness at the moment, his lack of acceleration, so T-Mac might go to Walker. Windsor's huge in, so he's the third in with his run and dash, and I think it's a really great sign of our belief that we're a real good shot in this game. As I wonder whether they'd risk him rather than giving him, giving him the opportunity to fully rest up with the bye next week and come back after the bye as fresh as a daisy. I think it's a really good sign of our belief in, we've got a red hot shot in this game, the fact that they've selected him. So, that they were some, I think that, certainly that their ins are more impressive, or in terms of ratings, at least. Not impressive, that's probably not the right way of framing it. So this is the way of framing it. On net impact player rating wise, their ins, they're plus 9.4 for their ins. So their ins are Rankin, Keane and Walker. As I said, their outs are Worrell, Pedler and Toby Murray, plus 9.4. We're plus 2.9 net impact for player ratings. Our ins are Caleb Windsor, Tom McDonald, Matthew Jefferson. Our outs are, as I said, Harrison Petty, Bailey, Laurie and Lucas Cook. Some of the high-level summary stuff, the rating differences, they're plus 1.7 for their attacking rating. We're plus 6 points. Defensively, they're plus 7.4, really probably arguably the best defensive unit system in the AFL. We're minus 0.1 for defence. Overall rating, how they stack up with each other, 5.9 we are to their 9.1. So they've got us there. Just on that rating stuff, I talked about the premiership window, the attack defence ratings chart. So early in the season, or I think around 6 or 7, there's only 2 teams in this quadrant, which was Freo and the Swans. There are a few more now, so it's Swans, Freo, Cats, Hawks, Suns are just in it, Giants are just in it, and leading the pack is Freo. But right in the middle of that pack, so what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are in that premiership window. Crows are smack bang in the middle. So, we're right on the the line between the two. So part of that is we need to improve our defensive rating, which we have been, as I spoke to before, in the last 4, 5, 6 weeks. In terms of lineups, average age, our average age is 25.9. Their average age is 26. Average matches is 109.4. Average matches for them is 103.1. Really fascinating. That is actually in terms of, this. I wonder how many games we've played this season where we've had more average matches than them. That's really a curious one. I guess we've got Melksham in the side and we've got Tommy Mack coming back in. There's a few games there. What's that? Is it 400? How many is Team Melk? I know Team Max played 250. It's 400 plus, let's say, AFL games of footy. Lucas Cook come out, that reduces it a little bit. So, yeah. So from an experience point of view, we're certainly well positioned. All time head to head, 27-20. So let's get a win in our column and make it 27-21 at the venue. 3-6 our way. So playing them, we played 9 games against Adelaide at Adelaide Oval. We've won 6 of them, which not many teams in the AFL could claim that. I wouldn't think such a record against them. Let's have a look at the just some of the other last 5 matches for the Crows. For the season, 8 wins and 5 losses. We're 9 wins and 5 losses. They're 6 on the ladder. We're 4th. In their last 5 games, they've gone 4-1. They rolled the Dogs. They just got over the top of the Cats. They had their bye. The Cats game was after the bye. They lost coming into the bye under the Hawks. They smashed North before that, and they were beaten. They beat the Tigers in the previous game. Of course, we beat our last 5 games are a win over the Bombers. Our fantastic win over the Pies, smashed by the Giants. Our painful loss against the Dogs, and our high watermark for the season probably in terms of performance. Our maybe the Pies game actually. Our terrific win over the Hawks was our 5th. It was the 5th of those games. In terms of some of the other high level numbers, just ripping through them. Actually, I might come back to them. I will come back to them. Let's have a look. So the betting, we opened at 279. We drifted to 327 in a 2-horse race. That's a pretty fair drift. And so a fair bit of money must have come on to the Crows. But we've tightened a touch in the last. We were 327 yesterday. We're back into 317. So a little bit tighter. The line, let's have a look at the line. The total match points is 177. The weather's looking a little bit better, so maybe we'll get close to that. And the line is 18.5 points. Value, I don't know about that. Don't bet on Melbourne games. I think it's, to be honest, those odds are about right. I'll talk to that a little bit better, a bit later. Weather-wise, from AccuWeather, love this. 14 degrees, real feel, 13 degrees, real feel in the shade, 12 degrees. But I love this description. Partly sunny with a shower in spots. I don't really know what that means in spots, so let's hope those spots aren't directly over Adelaide Oval. Light winds, southerly 17 kilometres, gusts up to 22 kilometres, and precipitation 0.4 millimetres of rain. So despite the sort of concerns earlier in the week that it's going to be a wet old game, it actually looks like it's going to be quite a dry game, hopefully, and really good conditions. So much better than what it looked earlier in the week, which I think helps us. I hope it helps us. Maybe I'm just sort of confirmation bias, but in terms of being better on transition, better with our ball use, that it certainly plays into our strengths, I think. So keys to winning. Just running through what I think the keys to winning, and perhaps this is being Captain Obvious, but I think in this game in particular, when you compare their strengths versus our strengths and our weaknesses versus their weaknesses, this is another one of those games where it's a classic matchup of an attacking side versus a defensive side. Instead, they're probably the best defensive side in the AFL. We're not. We're one of the best attacking sides in the AFL, and they're improving in the last couple of weeks, but that had been previously a struggle for them in the first third of the season. So given all of that and our comparative strengths, the keys to winning, I think, are winning the contest. Keys for us winning the contest, winning the clearance and stoppage battle, particularly inside 50 and in the front half of the ground. Winning the post-clearance battle, I think, is going to be particularly important in this game. Even more so, winning the inside 50 ground ball battle is going to be critical. It goes without saying, winning the scores from stoppages battle is going to be massive for us. We really need to leverage the likelihood that we'll have more stoppage clearance wins than them in total. We've got to score from them. And then finally, I think the other one for us is super important, is win the scores from the turnover battle. I think also, and I'll touch on this in a little bit in a sec, but I think also scores from the back half will be a big factor in this game. And if we can score more from the back half than them, it'll go a long way. I mean, that's really more of a sort of output or an outcome measure, I think, really. But if we can, that will be evidence of us moving the ball well from our back half and perhaps taking advantage of the way they like to defend, which is really man on man, which I'll speak to in a sec. So I think they're the keys for us winning. So keeping those keys to winning in mind, these are some of the key stats, I think, for this game, comparative stats between the two teams. Both teams play a really low disposal, low possession, territory-focused style of footy. That's, that we share a DNA in that sense. Again, it is very similar to the way Hardwick and Goodwin and, particularly the Crows, they're a real meat and potato side, real meat, old school side, low handball meters gained, for instance. Both teams are focused on territory, getting it forward and winning the contest when you get it forward. So low disposal, low possession. So evidencing that, we're 15th for average disposals per game in the AFL. They're 11th. We're 14th for least uncontested possessions, least uncontested possessions. They're 14th, we're 17th. Both of us down near the bottom of the table for number of uncontested possessions, both down near the bottom of the table. Well, I guess the Crows are mid-table for average disposals per game. They are a kicking side focused on territory like us. As I said, they're number one in the AFL for metres gained with their kicks. We're number 8. Conversely, we're number 6 for handball metres gained with 338 metres per game. Crows are dead last, so 18th in the AFL for handball metres gained with only 112 metres by hand per game. And when they weren't travelling so well in the first third of the season, there was lots of commentary that was a key reason why, that they weren't playing the modern transition footy that everyone seems to love, or everyone, with good reason to a degree, because it's exciting to watch. But the way Swans are playing is the obvious exemplar of that style. And, they're averaging 338 more handball metres gained than their opponents each week. They're averaging something like, I forget what it is, 900 metres gained by hand per game, the Swans. So really completely different styles, and they don't chain up by hand and run and carry the way, certainly not the way the Swans do, and not the way we do. So, that's going to be a really interesting one to watch. As I said before, Crows are a classic meat and potatoes team. Contest and pressure is king. That's important for all teams. It's been important for us all season, but particularly, as I said, in the last few weeks, and this sort of that thing I'm trying to try back with the theories of the case that I mentioned at the top of the show is, I think in the last few weeks, we've really consciously played a different style that is going to be less taxing in terms of aerobically, and our running power still requires physical strength and obviously, because you've got to win the contest and pressure. But we're playing a very similar style of footy in the last 6 weeks to the way the Crows play all the time, which I think is interesting. So contest and pressure is king for both teams, particularly the Crows. Evidencing that, Crows are number 2. evidencing that Crows are number 2 for contested possessions. Apologies for that if that's just come through your headphones. Just knocked my microphone off my stand. Crows are number 2 for contested possessions. We're number 6. Crows number 2 for ball winning equity points. So for points of winning the ball, we are number 2. Sorry, I was just checking that I'm still recording after that bit of a drama with my microphone. So Crows are number 2 for ball winning equity points behind the Swans, who are number 1. We're number 6. So both teams are super strong at the contest. Post clearance contested possessions will be critical in this game. We're number 4 in the AFL for post clearance equity points, behind the Swans, Giants and Suns, and just ahead of the Cats in 5th. The Crows are 8th. So post clearance contested possessions, super important in this game. Both teams are pretty strong in this space, but we're really, really good. Clearance and scores from stoppages are our one wood. As I said before, will be key to us winning this game. We'll be winning more clearances, but of course, more critically, scoring from those stoppages more than they do. They're our one woods. We average 3.1 more centre clearances than our opponents in the AFL, number 2 in the AFL per game. So every game we average 3.1 more centre clearances. Number 2 in the AFL behind the Lions and above Freo at number 3. We're in good companies there. Crows are way down at 14th, so it really highlights an area of strength for us that we can leverage, hopefully. Interestingly, we average 2.3 less stoppage clearances than our opponents. So we're 14th in the AFL for differential, in terms of differential, not total, but our differential compared to our opponents each week. So on average, we have 2.3 less stoppage clearances. That's really interesting in terms of we've got the best ruck in the AFL. So we're just ahead of the Lions. The Lions are 14th. We're 13th in the Lions. The Crows, I should say. The Crows 14th. So they're not brilliant at stoppage clearances either. Just out of interest, the Lions are number 1, Hawks 2 and Saints 3 for that, for stoppage clearances. And I wonder if that's, having fewer stoppage clearances than our opponents on average. I wonder if that's a function of opposition coaches bringing extras to the stoppages, like in the Dogs game, 2 or 3 extra to the stoppages to counter Maxi's dominance and to win territory. And so I wonder whether the Crows will do that in this game, though, as I'll talk to, their defensive system doesn't really allow them to bring extras to the stoppage because they play a very man-on-man defensive system. So we're number 3 in the AFL for winning first possession at stoppages. Lions are number 1 and Freo number 2. Again, really good company. This is really fascinating. Again, this is a opportunity for us to exploit definitely a relative strength over them. So we're number 3 in the AFL for winning first possession at stoppages. The Crows are number 17. That's, really speaks to, I guess Maxi's dominance, but that's going to be a really, really important sort of leveraging winning first possessions and then turning them into a clearance. So that might help explain why we average few total clearances in terms of, fewer than our opponents, but we're number 3 for scores from stoppages. So whilst we average 2.3 less stoppages per game, clearances per game than our opponents, we're number 3 in the AFL for scores from stoppages, behind only the Lions and the Swans, again in good company. For that number, Crows are 11th. So, they're not really doing great in terms from winning stoppages or scoring from stoppages or centre clearances. So it should be an area that we really go to town on. And so the other one that I didn't mention, selection, is, I thought there was a good chance that Heath was going to come in, although maybe he was injured. I think I read maybe on Binman he was injured. So one again, Maxi's going to be critical, isn't he? So just the way he played last week, one out against, is it Lachlan McAndrew? Perhaps surprisingly, this certainly surprised me, we're number 4 in the AFL for ball use equity points. Again, in great company behind the Swans, Suns and Giants. Curiously, those same 4 teams are the top 4 for post-clearance equity points too. I'm not sure if there's what the connection might be between the two or if that's just a coincidence. So we're number 4 in the AFL for ball use equity points. The Crows are 12 for that. So we're doing more damage with how we use the ball. We're getting more scoreboard impact. That's what that means, the equity points for ball use, than every other team, bar 3 in the AFL, the Crows are 12th. Scores from forward 50 stoppages, noting my sort of comment before how critical this is going to be. Hawks are number 1 in the AFL for scores from forward 50 stoppages. Freo number 2. We're number 6. That is really impressive. Crows are number 12th in the AFL for that. So we've got an advantage there as well. Defending scores from stoppages, the opposite to that. The Crows, speaking to how good their defensive system is, they're number 2 in the AFL for defending scores from stoppages inside 50. We're number 6 though, so that ain't too bad. In fact, that's much better than, I'm really surprised at that number because that's a season long. That's not, this business about the last 6 games. That's season long. So we're actually defending scores from stoppages inside 50 pretty effectively. So Cats are 12, Freo are 16th as a contextual bit of data. We're averaging 21.6 per game from defensive midfield chains. I mentioned that was a big factor in the game against the Bombers. Number 2 in the AFL. 20.9% of our shots at goal this season have been on the run, so not from set shots. Number 2 in the AFL. And we're 3rd in the AFL for forward half intercepts in the last 6 weeks, after being in the bottom 3rd for that for the first 6 weeks. So those last 3 data points, I think, really speak to our game style to a large degree, and will be really big factors in this game coming up. Just really quickly racing through some of the, next I've just ticked over the hour mark. So much for the hour of the power, look at the hour and a quarter power, it doesn't quite work. So I said they've got us defensively. We've got them from an attacking perspective. Just some of the numbers, we're +2 contested possessions a game. We're better in that space. They're minus 0.9. I probably spoke to all of the others, but points from turnover, we're averaging 51.2. We're giving up 51.2. They're defending a little bit better, which probably speaks to their defensive strength. They're only giving up 48.5. We're averaging 97.7 points this year. So far, they're 90.6. We're scoring 53.3 on average from turnover. They're 52.5, so not miles behind. This is the big one that I mentioned before, 39.6 points per game we're averaging from stoppages, 5.4 more than them. They're only 34.2. So that's something that we can definitely lean into and take advantage of. Defending wise, they defend points from turnover. They're giving up 48.5. We're giving up 51. Probably the one that they're really excellent at, and this is why it measures up to be such a terrific game, is points from stoppages. They're only giving up 28.8 and we're giving up 37.3. So, a lot will come down to which team defends stoppages. Actually, I think of it just on that last stat, I think about points from stoppages. Where was it? I think that that wasn't stoppages inside 50. It was stoppages, all stoppages around the ground. Perhaps I'm wrong on that. So let's have a look now. So key players, looking at their rating players in terms of their key players, just in terms of which, their top rated players this season. No surprise, Dawson is the top rated player. He's had a season average of his player rating this season is 19.7, but it drops off a little bit from there. It's interesting, and it probably speaks to, I have a feeling they're a little bit overrated on the back of these 2 wins. Perhaps that's a bit of wish casting on my behalf, but their player ratings aren't super impressive, I have to say, in terms of that. Jordan Dawson's miles are in front, 19.7. Then it goes to Sam Berry, 12.7. Wayne Miller, 11.9. Isaac Rankin this season's 11.7. Lachlan McAndrew, 11.5. Josh Rochelle, 11.1. And Ben Keys, 10.9. Compared to our players this season, our top-rated players, Maxi Gawn, 18.7. Cozzy second, 17.7. Kate Chandler, 14.2. Jack Steele, what a recruit, 13.2. Jake Bowie, 12.8, and Tommy Sparrow. So, our top, we're rating much better than them, really, is the point that I was trying to highlight there. Key players, obviously Jordan Dawson, barometer, he's been amazing in the last block of time, particularly what he's got going on in his world. In the last 6 weeks, Dawson is the number 1 rated player in the AFL. Just out of interest, Maxi's the 4th and Cos is 8th in that block of time. So there's some serious talent on display in this match coming into it. So he'll be key. He's key to how they move the ball. He's a talisman. He's key for inside 50. He's a dynamic footballer. So it'll, like, do you tag? Who would tag? I don't think we will tag him. I think it's more about our defensive system and limiting his damage. But maybe, I don't know, maybe Steele goes to him and does a negating role. Lachlan McAndrew I'll put as one of the key players because I think that, as I noted, that ruck battle is going to be totally critical. Scores from stoppages and total number of clearance and stoppage wins are just going to, I think, be just about the biggest factor in this game. So he's obviously critical. He's going to go head-to-head against Maxi for the whole game. Let's hope Maxi does the same thing he did to Brian last week and puts him in his box. He's 26 and he's really, I think, made the most of the new ruck rules this year. He's a tall fella, 209 centimetres. He's third for hit-outs in the AFL behind Maxi Gawn and Brodie Grundy. I think the other player who's going to be important is Keys, in large part because of what I was talking about before, about how critical winning ground balls inside 50 is going to be, winning ground balls full stop and post-clearance possessions, all strengths of Keys. So, he's also a heart and soul player, a player who can really get them up and excited and get the crowd involved. So he's number 2 in the AFL for ground ball, gets inside 50. Nick Watson is number 1 for that stat. He's number 1 for forward 50 crumbing, which I think is straight off the aerial contests. So super important player, and be interesting to see who goes to him. Maybe Colt goes to him. That would be a really interesting matchup. Certainly 2 players who are characters in the best sense of the word. So that would be a fun matchup, if nothing else. And so that might be an interesting matchup for him. I think the other players that are really important in this game, in part because of their quality, but also their sort of ability to hurt us on the scoreboard, is Rochelle Rankin, who comes back in, and Tex Walker, who also comes back in this week. All right, so wrapping it up now, prediction. I really like Simpson's analysis across different platforms, SEN and on Fox, and when I've heard him covering games on the radio, and on 360 Horse as well, Longmire as well. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy the way they use vision to describe what they're explaining. And on Tuesday night on 360, Simo broke down the Crows' defensive system, which I found fascinating. It was terrific. He, whilst praising the Crows' defensive system, which he described as, really one-on-one, and he's highlighting that game. I don't know that that's how they play all the time, but they're certainly more one-on-one than we are. We're very much a zone defence. So he was praising how well they have been going in the last couple of weeks defensively. He used vision for the last couple of games. But he also seemed a little bit sceptical, I thought, as he noted that method, that one-on-one method, is super hard work, and it also creates an out-the-back rebounding scoring opportunity because the last defender pushes up to the contest, whereas for us, for instance, the last defender sits back and is left alone to be an anchor, if you like, or a goalkeeper style. We press up high, they press up super high, even higher than us. We've not been pressing up as high in the last 6 weeks, again linking back to the change game style for this period of time when to mitigate the fatigue. But that, Simo noted that their style, the defensive system that the Crows use, is hard work to do, requires really, really elite fitness, but it also creates rebounding out the back scoring opportunities because that anchor role pushes up to the contest. And I'm hoping that we can exploit that. So our method, conversely, is much more zone defence, and we look to create outnumbers from that, which we do quite well, and it's been a big factor in our defensive improvement in the last 6 or 7 weeks, which I think David King highlighted on that preview show, the stats on First Crack preview on Wednesday night. And we can get an outnumber but that also takes a lot of running. So But their defensive system, and if we're going to take advantage of it, which is get rebound goals out the back and do what we do well and transition the ball from the back half, both of those systems, our offensive system and their defensive system, require really elite running and elite fitness, because one-on-one defense that pushes up also has to work back super hard when the ball's turned over. All of them, they don't get the buffer of that player who's the goalkeeper, and rebound transition from the defensive half is super taxing as well. So I think that's important, because this game is going to come down to fitness and running power. I think that's going to be the key factor, and really, to be honest, that's my main concern coming into the game. The Crows, this is their third game post their bye. They looked powerful in their win over the Cats at Adelaide Oval. It was largely wet and slippery conditions. And when I was thinking about this game, I thought, well, that would, that was an interesting game to look at in terms of this game, because the Cats play a super, super similar game style to us, and really similar. And so, obviously we're playing the Crows at Adelaide Oval as well. So, interesting thing to take a line through it. So they were powerful in that win, but they were dynamic against the Dogs and looked fitter than they have all season to my eye. And so that's potentially a little bit of a misnomer, because the Dogs look so flat. So, but they did look in good nick. So, and of course, I think that increased fitness post-bye is really the big factor in their uptick in form. And conversely, we're, of course, really desperate for our bye. We're really needing that bye. And the game, is at Adelaide Oval. That obviously gives them an advantage just with their form. And, it's worth noting that whilst they finished the home and away season on the top of the ladder last year, and, they were pretty dominant by the end of the season, that was on the back of a late season surge. I think from memory, they won their last 8 games. After round 10 last year, they were 6-4, 6 on the ladder. The same point as the season as we are now, around 14, they were 9-5. They're 8-5 this season. They've only played 13 games. They played 14, or hadn't had their bye yet last season. So they went, I think, after their bye. From memory, they didn't lose a game. So maybe we'll follow something similar. Touch wood, we will. So they were 8-5, pretty much where they were the same this last season as are this season. So that suggests to me that, like the Lions, the Crows' high-performance program, and no surprise given that's probably Burgess was there, he's left now, but no doubt they similar philosophies. So like the Lions, the high-performance program is timed to peak in the back third of the season and towards the final. And, they didn't get it quite right last year, the Crows, because they sputtered once the finals commenced. So all in all, given the fitness stuff, given that it's Adelaide Oval, logic suggests they've got a significant advantage. And so I'm not surprised, as I said before, we've drifted from 279 opening. We went out to 327 now. What do I say? It's 319 or something, 318. It's a fair drift. But to be honest, from a punting perspective and from a sort of analysis of this game, unfortunately, I reckon those odds are about right. So, probably, the fitness and the Adelaide Oval are the two biggest factors. Otherwise, I think, taking them out of the equation, even if this was at the Adelaide Oval, if we were post-bye, it'd be close to equal favourites, I suspect, for this game, or that's my sense. So, against that, I really, really like, as I've talked about at the top, how King has talked about this game and our approach to this match. So, for example, talking about the game for the last 2 or 3 weeks as part of a sequence of games, and with the sort of bye being the stopper at the end point of that, and naming that stuff, not looking at a week, or we're looking at like a sort of group of games rather than week in, week out, and really pumping up leaning into the fact that we haven't had a bye, talking about it in the media. So going the opposite way, to which is the sort of the way footy is often talked about by coaches, that, there's no excuses, yada, yada, yada. I really like his approach to this game in the preparation. And we can really throw everything at the Crows, knowing that we've finally got our 2-week break coming up. Kingy will have the boys in the right headspace for this game, I reckon. I think that's something that I've been really impressed with outside maybe the Giants game and the Bombers game in Gather Round. We have approached each game. I think the Freo game we started slowly. We've been in a good sort of psychological space in terms of being ready and turned, ready to go for each game. And so I think that's going to be critical in this game. We have to jump out of the box. We need to win that contest early, and critical, I think, is put some early scoreboard pressure on the Crows, keep the crowd out of it from the get-go. If we can do that, I think that we're in with a real good shot. Personally, I can't see us having the legs to go full turbo transition mode. But if we can apply enough pressure, we'll get our chances to score on turnover, particularly when, you consider what I said before about the defensive system. The Crows like that one-on-one defensive system, creates a risk of scores on turnover, rebounding, offside. Some of the commentators are starting to talk about it as. So we'll get our shot with that. And so whilst we won't go full turbo transition like, for instance, we did against Sydney, I think that we'll still score our fair share of goals on turnover and moving the ball effectively from the back half. The Crows, as I said a couple of times, are all about contest and pressure, but we are too. And whilst we're not at our best running-wise, we've been terrific in the contest in the last few weeks, really, really good, with the obvious exception of the Giants game. Even if the weather's looking better, but it still might be a little bit wet and slippery. So there'll be plenty of contests. There'll be plenty of stoppages. Maybe a bit lower scoring. So contest will be key, as we're winning the clearance battle, as I talked about earlier, and winning the contest inside 50 will be key. All things that we've been brilliant at in the last 2-3 games, or last couple of games. We've been winning ground balls inside 50. We've been scoring from those ground balls inside 50. We've been tackling inside 50. We've been scoring at around 50% from, our inside 50. We've been retaining the ball inside 50, despite kicking long. And as I said a number of times, I'm convinced our recent strategy of so many long kicks to a contest to the top of the goal square, less in the high transition Pies game, but in the other ones, is about mitigating our lack of run and getting it deep inside 50. I'm convinced that's as much about sort of mitigating the lack of run as it is about scoring, which we've been really, as I said, effective in doing so. But I think as important as that is getting territory, scoring from ground balls. And I heard Maxi talk about this in terms of being criticised. Well, the question was asked post Pies game, what was your feeling about that last quarter, kicking it long and having Cameron outmark you twice? And that was framed like a negative. And when I watched that replay, Corns was banging on about it and talking about, well, they've just got to stop doing that. Or maybe it was Daisy Thomas. Peanut, like we were doing it deliberately. And Max bristled at that question and made the comment and said, well, they don't mind Cameron outmarking. The point is getting it deep inside the goal square. In that provides the opportunity to obviously get territory, because it's 10 metres out from our own goal, and getting scoring from ground balls and those things. But what Maxi said is that it allows us to set up our defensive structure behind the ball. So, and in both those examples, we ended up bouncing the ball back inside, and on one of them we scored. And Daisy Thomas didn't mention either of those things. So I thought that was a really interesting insight from Maxi in terms of that strategy of kicking it deep, is that doing so allows us, even if it is turned, there's an intercept mark, allows us, or a point, allows us to get our defensive structure set up and make it difficult for the opposition to transition, that basically to go end to end from the goal square to goal square. That is pretty tricky when you've got a solid defensive structure with players that can cover the ground and do the sort of defensive spread required. And finally, whilst the Crows look really fit at the moment, I reckon we have a better athletic profile. And so I reckon we can match their run, even with our sort of level of fatigue at the moment. I think we can match their run. And I also think people have been pretty quick to anoint the Crows as a top 4 contender on the back of their last 2 wins. I watched both of those games live, the game against the Cats and then the game last week against the Dogs. but I thought I'll watch the highlights last night just to sort of get a handle on those games again, which I did. So I just watched the mini thing, like 15 minutes of each of the KO mini or whatever. Yes, the Crows were good, but against the Cats, they only won by a point. That game was wet. It was low scoring. And against the Dogs looked gassed, particularly in their back half. In the second half, they were woeful. They were terrible defensively. All of the poor things that the Dogs are defensively came out in that game. And much like our game against the Bombers, that game was over at quarter time. So, just I'll note that whilst they ran up a big score, I think it was 120 or something, they only actually ended up winning that game against the Dogs by 57 points, which if that was the D's, there'd be plenty of Demonland posters would have hopped into us for not putting the Dogs to the sword and winning by 100 percentage. We'll miss out on the finals because of not winning that game by 100. Given they led at quarter time by 7 goals, 42 points, 43 points, only won the game by 57. So, so whilst they were strong in both of those games, I think, to be honest, my feeling is they weren't as good as what people pumping them up as. So all in all, putting all of those things together, my head says we'll do really well to win. Can't quite bring myself to say we won't win or that the Crows will win. So my head says we'll do well to win. But my heart says we're red hot chance. And I've just got a feeling, I don't know, it's just probably my optimism, but I just love Kingy. I'm right behind I'm on the King bandwagon. I'm driving it. And so, as I said a number of times, I just feel like he's a clever coach. He'll go to town on the meat and potatoes style the way the Crows do. I'll be really looking forward to what he does tactically. I think the boys will be in really good headspace and set for this game. We've got a bye next week. We can attack it. So I think we're a red hot chance. I have a feeling we might win. I'm going to go along and watch the Casey game as much of it as I can, and I'll delay I'll watch it as live or a delayed beginning to the Crows game, because the Casey game's at Williamstown, which is just up the road from me, and I want to go see Casey play live. So that's exciting. The Australia plays USA in the soccer at 5 a.m. I go to Willie to watch us play there, Casey, and then the D's in the afternoon versus the Crows. What a fantastic Saturday. I cannot wait for tomorrow. Everyone get along to Casey if you can, to Williamstown if you can, and if you happen to be going to Adelaide, DL Fart, if you're listening to this and driving across to Adelaide, won't surprise me. So hopefully you're getting a chance to listen to this podcast on the drive across if you are going. Enjoy the game. Thanks for listening. I've been Binman, and I will be on the Steamerland podcast. We'll be back on maybe next Tuesday night, Monday or Tuesday night. We just have to confirm that. And I'll be doing a Stats File preview pod next week. I'll review this game just gone, and I might look at some of our season numbers in lieu of a preview of the following week. So, thanks for listening. I've been Binman, and I will catch you later. Go Red Leggers.
It's a grand old flag, it's a high-flying flag, it's an emblem for me and for you. Well, it's the emblem of the team we love, the team of the red and the blue. Well, every heart beats true for the red and the blue, as we sing a song for you. Should old acquaintance be forgot, keep your eye on the red and the blue. Where the team played fine in the year 39, we're the team that no one can lick. And you'll find us there after the final bell with the spirit of 1926. Every heart beats true for the red and the blue, as we sing this song to you. Should old acquaintance be forgot,